Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of GaudiMitSpes22.com, Podbean podcast and YouTube video. Very pleased today to be joined by two old friends, my former colleague, my comrade in arms, Dr. Rodney Howsare, but the guest of honor tonight, who I should introduce first. To hell with you, Howsare. I'm going to introduce first Dr. David C. Schindler, who teaches at the John Paul II Institute, Studies of Marriage and Family, Washington, D.C., Pontifical Institute. He's a professor of metaphysics and anthropology there and PhD advisor and probably a whole bunch of other stuff that doesn't get listed in official bios that he has to do anyway.
Take out the trash and clean the office.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
But welcome, Dave. Thanks for being on the show.
yeah, always a pleasure. Been looking forward to
I was
reconnecting with you guys.
Yeah, I want to give a big shout out. The idea for this podcast came from I watched an episode of the Space Salvi Institute interview with you, Andrew Prediprin, and my two friends, Andrew Prediprin and Bobby Mixa. That's a great podcast, the Space Salvi podcast. But they did a podcast with you on a book that you're writing. And I
Mhm.
thought, yes, I want to interview David about this as well. And the book you are writing is on the crisis, the nature of authority and the crisis of authority in our culture today. And I thought, yeah, Rodney sent me before we went on here an article by Carlo Lancelotti on Del Noce's approach, Augusta Del Noce's approach to authority in Humanum that I thought was excellent. So I really have, because I'm at a loss. I don't know what you've written in your book. Uh,
Mhm.
Normally, when I interview a guest, I will have read their article or their book or whatever. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Dave, and say what I've seen the interview with the Space LV people, but I don't want to just parrot that, obviously. So I want to turn it over to you and say, okay, so what is this book about? Why did you write it? The whole bit.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. It's funny. This is the last thing that I would have thought, imagined that I'd be writing. I mean, for a number of reasons. Even my venturing audaciously into the field of political philosophy is a surprise for me, given my interests were almost exclusively in metaphysics and philosophical anthropology. Um, but for a variety of reasons, I came to understand, partly through my wife, who's a political philosopher. When we got married, I used to make fun of her interests, and but she managed to persuade me about the importance. And then also, I mean, oddly, reading Hegel, if you can believe it, I came to see. I always thought politics had to do with. There you go. I always thought politics had to do with just making compromises, sort of pragmatic solutions, and that there was nothing really intellectually um, uh, satisfying about
Yeah.
thinking about politics. It's just something you do because you have to. But I came to realize that that's not true at all, and I've come increasingly to realize that in fact I've always been interested in it. I just didn't know that that's what I was interested in.
Mm.
I had conceded too much to a modern conception of what politics is about, and I didn't realize that it really is about um, the realization of the meaning of being. It's one of the most fundamental disclosures of the meaning of reality that kind of sets the horizon for everything else. So, uh, one of the first books that I wrote was on Plato's Republic, and I mentioned in passing there that it's an odd coincidence, just state of affairs, that Plato happens to present his most robust account of his own metaphysics precisely in a book on political philosophy. I just thought that was a curious accident, but I've come to realize that that's absolutely crucial to understanding what the Republic is all about. And so that's sort of the background. Part of the argument is to try to communicate then this idea that authority is not just a practical matter about keeping order and policing things and kind of managing. In the very first place, what I argue in the book is that authority is not in the first place in the order of the good, um, and not even in the first place in the order of the true, although that's already something worth thinking about. But it's most fundamentally in the order of the beautiful. Uh, and when you see that and connect it to the theme of beauty in Balthazar, that in a certain sense it's the one that opens the horizon within that already engages our mind at a fundamental level and engages our disposes us at a fundamental level that enables us to think and to act properly. So it enables us to enter into the order of the true and the order of the
Yeah.
good. It comes first, and it's primordial, and it's what sets the horizon. So
It
that's the
breathes
goal.
fire. It breathes fire into the equation of the true and
Yeah,
the good.
yeah. Nicely put. That's exactly right. So it operates really at that fundamental level, which is why political speech needs to be poetic in that sort of way. But
Yeah.
needs the rhetoric actually. I've come to see that rhetoric actually is a much more interesting reality. But so all that as a preliminary point being said, it has become evident to me that the loss of a sense of authority, sort of the crisis of authority that we experience all over the place in the family, in schools, and in the political order. Um, this is more profoundly connected to the crisis of meaning. That people talk about, the meaning crisis, that John Paul II talks about, that John Vervaeke talks about, uh, the nihilism that has was threatening authority is what Nietzsche most lamented. Actually, I mean, that was mind blowing when that occurred to me. We think of him as kind of a rebel, but I think really ultimately what he wanted was to recover some sense of authority. That's what the will to power is about. But it's all compensation for a loss of authority. So anyway, that's a very long answer. I mean, I could go on and on, but I'll just leave it there.
Well, well, I'll turn it over. That's great. That's what I remember that when you began your conversation with Bobby Mixa on the Space LV thing, that you still weren't certain what the title of the new book is going to be or the publisher.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I'm waiting to hear back from a publisher. I've been waiting a long time. But I'd rather not say until that gets resolved. But the title, at least the proposed title, is Authority and Its Counterfeits.
Mm.
Um, and
Yeah.
then the subtitle, I think, is probably going to get some pushback on, but the one I have now is A Political, Poetical, Philosophical, and Theological Theory. So I'm trying to get at the nature of authority in terms of language, in terms of metaphysics, in terms of thinking, and also, in terms of God and the church relationship to the political order.
Very
So
good.
basically, and part of the argument is that one of the reasons we've one of this maybe symptoms of a loss of a sense of authority is the fact that we've separated all these things
Mm.
from each other.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Rodney because Rodney, you sent me that very interesting article, which I speed read right before this thing from Carlo Ancelotti, where he talks about Del Noce's concept of the relationship between authority and power and actually to the etymology of it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and then segue into discussing that with Dave.
Yeah, I think that might be a good place to kind of jump off a little bit is the kind of knee-jerk reaction that the average. So it's interesting if you think about it, right? If we do the kind of the history, if we did a genealogy of what has happened to authority, it'd be kind of interesting, right? Because already in Luther, there's a little bit of an aversion, right? And
Right?
then by the time you get to the Enlightenment, let's get rid of our self-imposed tutelage, right? You get that kind of talk.
That's right.
And then, but what's interesting is today it's trickled down to the man on the street, right? Who has a knee jerk of when you say the word authority, it doesn't make somebody, get goosebumps or anything. It's a knee jerk kind of like, oh, gross, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so I guess how
Yeah,
does
I
that
mean, just
happen?
a
Yeah.
little anecdote is I was giving a lecture at a university, which will go unnamed, but the person organizing it asked me to take the word authority out of the title because he said no one will show up to your talk.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe just talk a little bit about that. Like how has the word authority gotten tarnished, and maybe what does that have to do with its relationship to power, maybe?
Yeah, so I mean, to say that authority is connected to beauty means that it's a kind of a revelation of there's a magnificence and dignity, and the idea is this is something that Bobby and I discussed with Space Alvey. He alluded to a footnote that I have about referring to Friedrich Schiller, the noble personality is able to, in a way, through the radiance of his personality, bring out the dignity of all, even inanimate things around him. Everything takes on a kind of a dignity, and it seems to me that that's the basic role that authority plays. It's related to the word augment, to enhance or augment, augere, to make
to,
increase,
to grow.
to grow, exactly, to amplify.
Yeah.
And the fundamental role of authority is precisely to cause the growth, bring about the growth, and the to elevate the dignity of everything that's around him. So I mean, the thing is, a really sort of concrete instance of this. Think about what the king meant in the Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
And it's not that you want somebody who's calling the shots. It's more than just a leader. There's something about the mission of the king, and the fact that this is an inheritance of a long tradition. There's a whole sort of mythology that comes along with it, and raises the dignity of those around him. I mean, you think of the scene, where what's his name from the who had just sacrificed his life to save the hobbits. Anyway, he sort of professes his allegiance to the king
Yeah.
there, and you see how meaningful that event is. Okay, so that's this,
Boromir.
thank you, Boromir, exactly. That's the sense of this radiance of a kind of dignity that I think authority ultimately means, which not only inspires action as we think of it, but I think it actually opens your mind to be able to think properly about things. That's a dimension I think we tend to overlook, the kind of intellectual side of things. But when it gets impoverished and reduced to a police function, basically,
Yeah.
then it's nothing. There's nothing inspiring about it. It's just something that you want to evade. You know, you want to try to do as much as you can without calling the attention of.
Well,
Um,
the character of Boromir is actually a very interesting analogy here because Boromir was very tempted by power. He
yeah,
wanted the ring, he wanted its power, and was constantly wanting to grasp at it. And yet, at the end of the day, he understood that his true authority was a moral and spiritual authority,
yeah, that's
and
right.
he sacrificed his life for the hobbits,
Yeah,
in their noble cause to actually get rid of the ring.
yeah. No, isn't that interesting? And it's when he sort of sacrificed, right, that kind of self-protective power, that he
Yes,
actually became an authoritative figure himself,
yes.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
coincided with his recognition of this authority above him. And that's the thing about authority, has this recognition of something above you that then actually becomes effectively present in you. By your recognition, you radiate authority yourself.
And not to dwell on this, but at the very end, when in the Return of the King, when Aragorn is crowned king,
Hmm.
the three hobbits who have essentially saved Middle Earth kneel before Aragorn, and he
Yeah.
lifts them up, and then he kneels in front of them and says, "You kneel before no man."
Yeah, isn't that?
So,
Yeah,
which shows that he understood the
yeah,
moral character of authority as something
yeah.
that transcended himself.
And notice, one might sort of from a more modern perspective say, "Oh, no, he's telling them not to kneel." And so he's actually removing the hierarchy of authority. But just imagine if the hobbits were to say, "No, I'm not kneeling before you. because we're
Well, that's
equal.
the whole point. That's
Yeah,
the point. Yes.
it's precisely that they kneel first.
Yeah.
That then the
Yeah.
dignity of his lifting them beyond that
That's
becomes so
right.
much
That's
more
right.
profound.
Aragorn wasn't saying, "Hey, dudes, authority blows chunks, so stop doing this." All right.
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's a totally different thing, and that brings up the difference between authority and power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, power is always going to be implied by authority, uh, but if you take power out of the context of authority, it becomes very different. It's no longer. I mean, notice we were just saying that um, Aragorn's authority enhances and elevates the authority of the hobbits,
Yes.
but
Yes.
power doesn't work that way.
Right.
You know, if you have power, then the existence of power in anything other than you is kind of a threat to your power. There's a sort of mutual exclusivity about power that you know, that just changes everything. And this is why we experience power as oppressive,
Yeah.
and why then in an age where we've lost any sense of authority, we think that authority simply means people who are allowed to have power,
Right.
you know, allowed for whatever reason. And there's nothing inspiring, exciting about that. And you want to minimize it as far
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
can I just interject a couple of things that have come to mind as you guys
Yeah.
are talking about this because it's so interesting. I mean, you think about the ministry of Jesus is so fascinating when you start asking the question of authority and then thinking about the Gospels.
Yeah. Right.
Because there's lots of references. I mean, there people are amazed that he teaches with such authority, right? But it's very clear that in this incarnate state, Jesus is so deferent to the Father.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're trying to fight Arianism, it can almost be inconvenient, you know, because he's like the Father is greater than I am, and you know, why do you call me good? Only the Father is good, right? But I
Yeah.
think the importance there is precisely him teaching that you gain authority. He didn't deny that he taught with authority.
Yeah.
He didn't say,
Right.
no, no, I don't teach with authority. He didn't deny that he taught,
Yeah.
but his authority precisely comes from the fact that he is submissive to something that he has to be faithful to,
Right.
which is so interesting,
No, it
right?
is. I mean,
Yeah.
just imagine that, you know, uh, simply giving a speech, a kind of charismatic speech,
Yeah.
that would have been a very different sort of thing. But notice he teaches with authority. What is he teaching? He's actually explaining scripture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, there's simultaneously a deference to the Father above him and to the tradition that precedes him.
Yes. Yes.
And those things are inseparable. One of the arguments I make in this book is the inseparability of that authority is expressed in the interrelation of the priest, the prophet, and the king.
Oh, interesting.
And
Wow.
they're all particular expressions of authority that are not reducible to the others, but
Hmm.
they require each other. And if you have, you know, a king who rejects the priest or who rejects the prophet, suddenly it's no longer authority we're talking about, it's power,
Yeah.
and so forth. I mean, you can see, you know, if you have the priest without the king, you have a private faith. You know, I mean, you could riff on this forever. Actually,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's really quite a rich theme once you break it open.
Right. And then one other thought I had that in a totally different vein than Jesus, I was thinking a little bit about like how jazz music works, right? And you
From
get
Jesus to jazz.
so you first of all have a musical form that begins
Yeah,
to like demonstrate that it's tapped into something.
yeah,
It's not just worthless. It's not just pandering to, you know, for money or whatever, that it's
right,
serious in some
right.
level. And then you get a generation or a series, I should say, of giants who have authority in the thing, you know, the Monk and Miles and Ellington and Bird, like the big legends. And I was thinking about the fact that there's a story where uh, Coltrane has kind of hit rock bottom. You know, his
Mhm.
drug
Oh,
addiction is so
really?
bad. Yeah, and he gets kicked out of the Miles Davis Quintet and all this stuff. And he's at a place. He's at a bad place, but he's at a club list and he sees Monk on stage playing,
Yeah,
and he realizes that Monk is like has really tapped into something even better than he has. That
right.
Monk is a genius in some sense that he is not there yet.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you guys know this, but he actually moved in with Monk. after
Well,
that. He went up
well,
to him afterwards and he goes, I want to come under your tutelage, so to
yeah,
speak, or whatever. And he spent a year, I think, at least in Monk's house, Monk teaching him the thing. And it's
yeah,
just it's the opposite of Monk having any kind of power
yeah,
over
yeah,
Coltrane. It's
yeah,
that Coltrane from within wants what Monk has, and
yeah,
Monk has the authority to give it to him.
right.
And so but it's because Monk himself is
Yeah,
under this thing.
right. That's right.
He's a
Right,
servant to it in a way, right?
right.
So that's kind of how authority
No,
works
that's really
in any
nice.
field. Yeah.
Yeah, something like this would be sort of the prophet, the category of the prophet, as I was, and and the thing
Yeah.
that's really beautiful and interesting about that is, it's what an authority does is, I mean, Bobby liked this line that I quoted in this essay that's going to be published in Communio, by the way, in our
Nice.
authority issue in Communio. I've got a single essay kind of encapsulation of some of the stuff, but there's a purely secular intellectual historian who's written some of the most interesting things about authority. His name is Krieger, and he one of the definitions he gives, or one of the descriptions that he gives, is that authority translates is a kind of transitional concept that translates higher principles into the kind of present practical circumstances,
Mm.
and that the authority figure is the one who mediates between these universal, timeless principles
Yeah.
and the reality that we live in. So connects, you might say, time and eternity.
Yeah.
This is something Del Noce is really excellent at. This is one of his main themes. But you see that Coltrane had the sense in Monk that he's tapped into a higher order,
Yeah.
and somehow, I mean, one can get uh, a little woo woo here with this, but there's kind of a channeling of something, of
Yeah.
of a kind of an insight, or a perception
Yeah.
of an order that then is getting translated very concretely
Mhm.
into this music. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, and it's why people are moved by the music.
Right. Right. It is a very specific thing, but it has a universal appeal because we're all potentially tapping into the same
That's
thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So we
Yeah.
can have access to it, but our access then, I mean, that's one of the things that's so amazing about this. It really is mediated through others.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
mean,
Very, very yeah.
this is the problem that Luther had.
Mm.
For him, it had to be just me and God privately, rather than recognizing that. And that's a loss of authority. And he was in the nominalist vision that is essentially God reinterpreted in terms of power,
Mm.
and no longer really in terms of authority. And so there's built into it, always the flip side. On the one hand, rebellion then against institutional structures. On the one hand, then on the other hand, a complete capitulation to them.
Mm.
In terms of the civil authorities, we give absolute deference to civil authorities,
Well,
but
as we saw with the Peasant War.
legal ones. No, exactly. Um, yeah, no, it's so whenever you break the mediation,
Yeah.
you never collapse in one direction. You always collapse in both at the same time,
Right.
which is pretty interesting.
Little piece of jazz trivia, Hauser. You
Uh-oh.
will be happy to know this.
Mm.
Jazz, believe it or not, was Lawrence Welk's favorite form of music.
Oh,
Can you believe that? The Mr. Champagne music, Mr.
Schmaltz.
1950s,
I didn't know you were a Lawrence Welk fan, Larry.
I wasn't. I saw that on a little documentary I was watching on the history of jazz, and it was just a little vignette on how it influenced so many people that you would not expect to be influenced by jazz. And one of them was actually Lawrence Welk, who loved jazz. But
My
One
parents
of
watched the show
one of
religiously.
America's, yeah, right. One of America's contributions to world culture.
Yeah.
That and
absolutely.
barbecue. Yeah.
That and barbecue. Yeah. So that, among many other things, this Negroni that I'm drinking because of my head cold is loosened my tongue a bit, so I have to be very I have to be a little more cautious than usual. Yeah, because I could talk about some other things America is exported to the world these days that I won't go into. But anyway, I like your concept there of mediation, uh, Dave, because I mean, going back to Luther, I mean, one of the things that you notice is as the Reformation unfolds, you can image the Reformation as just this cacophony of just things just shatter and splinter like a broken mirror or broken glass, and it's just everywhere, and it makes no sense. But actually, there is a logic to it. As the Reformation unfolds, it becomes less and less and less sacramental, less and less and less institutional. As the Reformation proceeds, I mean, Luther remained kind of still sort of Catholic in so many ways. And yet, every disagreement that comes after Luther, based on the principles he himself established, was like, dude, you don't understand the full revolution you've unleashed here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and it's actually, I mean, one of the ways of putting in a nutshell the argument that or the description that I was giving authority in the very beginning of our conversation is simply to say that authority is quasi-sacramental.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
And the thing is, the moment you start thinking about in those terms, it actually becomes very well quasi-sacramental. For 1,000 years, the church would have simply said sacramental. I mean,
Mm.
um, the anointing of the king was a conferral of a certain kind of holy orders that the church recognized was different from the priesthood. The king was never able to, um, um, you know, confect the sacraments, the Eucharist.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but would often process with the clergy at mass and was the king was recognized as having certain healing powers. It's kind of interesting. The point being that there was something like a sacramental presence, and I actually think that's helpful because you see that the point is not just that the authority is a symbol of something in the kind of modern sense of symbol, that it makes us think about something, but it actually brings the presence of the higher order
Yeah.
to bear,
Yeah.
and it makes it effectively present in this very concrete way. So that, I mean, this is why it changes our experience then of order. This isn't just like management that is imposing certain limits on things so that nobody gets in each other's way, but is actually opening up a horizon in which things are meaningful and they actually amplify the presence of God.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, um, it's not accidental, and this is one of the arguments I make in the book. It's not accidental that the beginning of the end of the sacramental vision of reality, where we no longer saw the cosmos as sacramental, but we only had these seven things that were kind of now reinterpreted as kind of magic or whatever,
yeah.
because there's no natural resonance. That actually coincided with the elimination of the king as an anointed. I
Wow.
mean, I think that you need to have a sense of that kind of authority to have a sense of a sacramental notion of reality.
You got
Now,
Wow.
to be.
does this mean that we need to have, is this the integralist thing? We need to have kind of a monarchy?
I was just going to say, you better be careful, Dave. You're already labeled a strong integralist, monarchist, restorationist. So,
Well, people say that I'm integral. I represent integralism light, which, I mean, it's just like I'm not
uh,
like anything, and that's the worst of all possible worlds. But yeah, the thing about integral is there's an insufficient. I mean, there are a number of things, but one is a kind of an insufficiently analogical way of thinking about this.
Yeah.
And
I
and
was
the
just about to say that people read your book, The Politics of the Real. They don't understand the very large section in there about analogy. They just don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's crucial. I mean, so the problem is that we typically with integralism, the one thing I appreciate about integralism is a sense of recovering authority in the church. And I mean, I think that that's clearly one of the desiderata pursued by them. The
Yeah.
problem is it tends to be understood in terms of power and simply without any kind of analogical difference between political authority and ecclesial authority. So you just want to
Right.
make the church kind of the last
Yeah.
judge or whatever, the ultimate power,
Yeah.
calling the shots in the world, and that to me misses the point. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Go ahead, Rodney.
Something I think we need to maybe touch on that is kind of implicit in what you're saying is, and it goes back to Luther a bit, but also modernity. Uh, if there's not, so what part of Luther's problem is the he kind of has a very bleak view of human nature, right? I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if it's Calvin that talks about total depravity, but Luther certainly seems to also subscribe
point
to.
that way. Yeah,
Yeah, he certainly points in that direction, right? So if that's the case, if we've become totally depraved by sin, then we
yeah,
don't have a natural
right,
desire or a natural connection to that which transcends us, that the good, the true, the beautiful, et cetera, which means then it would have to either be imposed,
yeah.
which
That's
is
right.
why their theory of government is very strong arm, right?
That's
It's
that's
right.
right.
I mean, Calvin's Geneva, they're, like it or lump it, right?
Yeah,
And then on the other hand, soteriology becomes a sort of legal fiction, right?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
God proclaims you just, but you're not really just, but it's God
Right,
can do that because God can
yeah,
make, squares round and stuff like that
right. Yeah,
practically or whatever. So that also helps to clarify the difference between authority and power a little bit. Do you mind touching on that a
yeah,
bit?
yeah. No, no. I mean, and the odd thing is, and I don't know if this will be apparent immediately, but and I would it would we'd need a bigger context to think it through. But there's a connection between analogy and authority, actually, that
Hmm.
would be interesting to think about. And I don't think you can sustain an analogy outside of the context of authority. Let me just sort of drop that and set aside for the moment.
Interesting.
Thing about the thing about uh, authority, think about how it realizes itself. So, if authority has this organic metaphor, right? It brings about growth. How does one make a plant grow? You
Hmm.
know, you can't just make it grow, and you can't force growth on it.
Right.
It's you provide from above, from outside of the plant,
Yeah.
conditions that it can't provide for itself, but those actually enter into it and it does the growing. So you're actually, the power that you're exerting is also the liberation of a power that's intrinsic to the thing itself,
Yeah.
and so it grows and strengthens of its own accord. So
Yeah.
that there you see, it's not a strong. There has to be in a kind of an analogy between
Yeah.
what's outside, what's above, and what's below. What's
Mhm.
in, the transcendent and the immanent have to have a kind of an analogical connection
Right.
for the activity from above to elicit and reinforce and strengthen the activity from below so that those are simultaneous. That's how authority works. And think about how that is connected with beauty.
Mhm.
Beauty, the way beauty imposes an order, it actually inspires the order to come from you as much as it's being given from without. It kind of elevates you into it.
Right. Yeah.
So
It
it acts both
enraptures, it
above and
enraptures, it
yeah,
Yeah.
enraptures.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think
which is a beautiful image.
it's either in your piece in your chapter on the good of authority and the authority of the good in
Hmm.
politics of the real, or it's in the Del Noce thing. I've been reading these things and I'm getting them all confused. But he talks about the analogy of light.
Hmm.
I think it's Del Noce maybe that, and maybe
That's
you
Del Noce.
it's Del Noce. Yeah, yeah. And it's really, I mean, it's so obvious, but after I read it, I was like, oh, that is so beautiful. But it's like if you didn't have a capacity in your sight,
Hmm.
right? Light would just be an imposition.
Yeah,
right?
right.
It would just be an imposition from without, like, ooh, here, I'm going to shove my light on you or whatever.
Yeah,
But what it does actually is it makes possible something that you already have implicitly, which is the ability to see.
yeah,
And
that's right.
I love all the in morning prayer,
Mhm.
just all over and over again, we're thanking God for the morning and all there's that all that light symbolism in all the Psalms is so beautiful. And you kind of think, why are we talking so much about
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, I've got it, but you
Yeah.
realize like, oh, that's what's happening is like I already desire to be a child of the light. That means not
Well,
right.
do you recall, why does God create the sun in Genesis?
No, go ahead.
To rule the day.
To
Oh,
rule
yeah,
the
that's
day.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
to rule the
to
day.
rule.
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that
It's
interesting? I
so
mean,
interesting.
they're
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, this isn't actually just a metaphor. There's a certain sense in which light is the physical presentation of the meaning of authority, sort of
Mm.
within the physical dimensions. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing to think about. And this is something. I mean, it sounds like you're saying crazy stuff, but then you sort of go back into the tradition and you just see they all recognize this, and this was all over the place. I mean, constantly.
Yeah.
It just was taken for granted in a way.
Yeah.
But now it's become kind of fantastical or merely, poetic in
Mhm.
our day. Um,
Very
And
but
it
none of
interesting.
that
mediates,
does justice to our own experience of things.
right. And it also mediates reality to us, right? It's in that sense, it's also like authority, like it's a
Yeah.
mediator.
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah. No, no, exactly. And right, because I mean the thing is we don't look at the sun,
Right.
right?
No.
You can't, and in fact we can't even see light.
Oh, interesting.
I,
Yeah.
I point this out to my students sometimes. I mean, outer space, it's black. Why? Because there's no light in it? No, it's filled with light.
Oh.
Why is it black? Because there's nothing for the light to reflect.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Yeah.
So we actually don't see light. We see everything in the light.
So good.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's how authority works. In a way, it doesn't call attention to itself. It sort of illuminates everything else. It radiates in a way.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Okay, so let's segue a bit since we've been at this about an hour. I mean, about 45 minutes. What is what is the downstream consequence? Let's begin with the church and then go into culture, or you can start with culture and to go into church. But what is the crisis we face right now? I mean,
yeah,
what's happening right now? It seems to me, and I'm just going to add my,
yeah.
that we have a crisis of authority in the church, not in the sense of, oh, there's all this dissent from papal teachings, and no, 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 no. There's a much deeper crisis of authority going on in the church right now. And I suspect that a lot of the chit chat about synodality and dialogue is a hint that we've lost a sense of authority.
Oh, I mean, completely. So, one of the things that has become clear to me is how, this is one of the revelations, I guess, I've had about the significance of politics. The political order really does set our horizon of understanding in a much more fundamental way than we realize.
Mm.
And it seems to me the horizon that the political order has set for us generally is that of liberalism, right? At least
Mhm.
this has been the case for the last few centuries. And what is liberalism? I mean, arguably, and this is an argument I make in the book and mention it in the essay too. It's an attempt to do politics without authority.
Mm.
It's an attempt
Ah,
to
Yeah.
it's an
Yeah.
attempt to set up kind of mechanisms
Yeah.
that can basically replace, like, perform the function of authority without any need to appeal to any authority. And the problem is that what you're doing is you're setting as like the fundamental horizon for our culture the absence of authority and a reduction of authority to power, which then we try to balance. The balance of power, that the whole business. It's ingenious. The mechanism of the branches of government limiting themselves, these ways of playing power off itself as a way of minimizing it.
Yeah.
Notice how that is a substitute for an authority that is limited by the order that it's bearing witness to that's above it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you eliminate that reference to what transcends, then it has to be self-limiting, and it does it in this kind of technological way, this kind of playing powers off themselves. Okay, then that sets the horizon within which we've lived now for centuries, and we can't help but reinterpret the church because this is the basic horizon of understanding.
Yeah.
The church becomes one of the entities inside of this horizon, and it's going to be shaped by it.
Yep.
So we can't possibly recognize the meaning of authority in the church if we don't also recognize it in the world, you might say.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Rodney,
these things sort of stand and fall with each other. I guess that's part of it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Rodney, did you want to?
No, I mean, I just want to echo that. Like you kind of quote, set the political order free to be merely political.
Mm-hmm.
And then the irony is everything gets politicized.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, that is the irony. It seems like you're actually doing away with authority, but now you're constantly a slave to power in every respect. And so then you have to multiply the state's own self-limiting mechanisms to try to preserve, any real space for freedom.
Right. It's strange. Yeah. I mean, one of the mistakes made by John Courtney Murray and his followers is precisely the assertion that secular government has no competence over religious matters.
Yeah.
Because that's a kind of backhanded way of saying that religious matters have no political dimension to them of any
that's
kind.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's one thing. I mean, so I don't know how to fix cars, right? So I'm incompetent in car fixing matters. But so how do I deal with that? I don't then make it a sort of an official family policy that I make no judgment about any kind of any mechanic is equally, even somebody, one of my kids who one morning claims to be a car mechanic, I have to, because I'm incompetent. No, I actually have a certain responsibility to find the most authority and then to trust him.
Right.
I mean, that's the only way. I mean, the thing is, but if I don't trust another, I'm making my incompetence the authority, the standard. I'm actually making that the last word on the matter.
Right.
And so suddenly I'm actually taking upon myself a kind of, final authority precisely in the form of incompetence and indifference.
Yeah.
And so now, now tolerance becomes the face of the good. You see how that follows.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The proper way for the good to be good is to be tolerant. Which is that indifference is the kind of has been absolutized,
And we don't do anything else like this in the universe. Like, right? Like if I want to become, like if I'm not competent in, classical music, I don't just say, oh, then all approaches to classical music are the same or are all equally valid, right?
That's right.
I'd have to start studying the authorities.
That's right.
Or anything. Like if I want to play basketball, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, who am I to judge? This coach is as good as this one, or this team's as good as that one. That would end up in disaster. That's what we do politically. Because we're competent, we say, well, then they're all as one's as good as the next.
Yeah,
the New York Times opera critic is obviously going to be somebody who knows something about opera. But when it comes to religion, the New York Times hires people that hate religion and don't know anything about it. All right.
Because they're the least biased,
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
so
the most
if you're actually, obviously Ross Douthat is an exception here, but this is an interesting analogy, it seems to me, because like you said, Rodney, in no other venture would we treat things in this manner. We deftly turn to authority and oftentimes the authority of skill and expertise that comes naturally from simply knowing about opera or art history or whatever. But when it comes to religion, as well, we don't want biased people, so we're gonna have people write on religion who don't know, their butt from a gun barrel, to put, as my father would say, about religion. See, that's the Negroni talking there. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this is something Plato is all about. I mean, why a kind of expert, and one has to be careful about the meaning of expertise. I mean, there's a kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
technocratic form of that.
Yeah.
But the point is that the only way to limit yourself. So that's what the incompetence is trying to do.
Yeah.
The only way to really limit yourself is to acknowledge an order above you that then naturally implies certain limits.
Yeah.
Because anytime then you make yourself self-limiting, you always end up imposing. You're actually not. You're absolutizing yourself.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
and the thing is, we see this in so many areas. So, for instance, Kant, with respect to religion, right? He says that he wants to set limits to reason
Hmm.
in order to make room for faith. He says, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the nature of the faith that he then recognizes? Religion within the limits of reason, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that kind of
Yeah.
thing happens all the time. Self-limitation is not possible.
Hmm.
Not because it's not likely, not because it's not trustworthy. It's actually not possible. The only way to really have limits is to acknowledge limits that are there, and that means acknowledging an
Yeah.
order that's greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why the political right can only genuinely be limited if it recognizes the
Natural
truth of
authority.
religion. Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
The
So
authority,
interesting.
the natural authorities. So therefore, it seems to me, and this would make someone like Glenn Olson happy,
Hmm.
hierarchy is an absolutely inherent and constitutive feature
Yeah.
of our
Yeah.
political reality.
I mean, of every I mean, just like you
Of
said, I
every
mean,
reality. Yeah.
it's the hierarchy is such a beautiful, I mean, wonderful. In fact, Jeannie, my wife, just asked me. She's working for Humanum, our journal, and I've just been commissioned to write something on sacred authority, sacred order, rather, which is the
Yeah.
translation of hierarchy.
Ah,
Uh, it means sacred order, and I mean, the fact of the matter is life is filled with it, and it's a beautiful thing. And when we talked about, which doesn't mean that it has to be rigid in one way and kind of top down only. I mean, one of the beautiful expressions of hierarchy that we discussed was Aragorn and
Yeah.
the right.
Yeah.
Real hierarchies that are genuine actually have this dynamic flexibility that they can invert and all sorts of really dramatic and
yeah.
beautiful ways that what's above subordinates itself and so forth. But that's very different from saying we're all equal and that
Yeah.
there's no such thing as authority and everything is just on this kind of flat line. I mean that's a
Well, when you think about it,
horribly
think about
monotonous view.
uh, there's no such thing as pure democracy in anything. Even our
Yeah,
government isn't a pure
right.
democracy. So the family is hierarchical. Educational institutions are hierarchical. Businesses are hierarchical. Traffic laws are hierarchical.
Yeah, that's
I,
right.
I mean, almost every facet of our life is
Yeah.
dominated by some concept of
Oh,
hierarchy.
it is. I mean, the thing is, the very fact that, we're looking at the screen here. I mean, why aren't our faces in one case turned upside down and the other? I mean, we have a sense of the right order of things, and I mean, it's absolutely everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That I mean, everything we can all just sort of look at what's in front of us here. I mean, everything here is an expression of a kind of an order and a hierarchy, and there's certain things that come first and set the context for others. It's just it's not just a fact of life that we resign ourselves to. It's actually something beautiful and
Right.
interesting.
Yes.
And I mean, eros is impossible without hierarchy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we eliminate, and this is why there's a connection between authority and eros, by the way. And that's what I should have said to the guy at the university. Let me just make that clear, and maybe we'll get a few more people back to the lecture.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh,
Well,
yeah, but
yeah,
we all again, these are things that at the moment you say it, you just see that it's obviously true, you
Yeah.
know?
yeah, I mean, that's why there's even a certain nostalgia for aristocracy in some
Yeah.
circles. But I think of the British guy Julian Fellows, who wrote Upstairs, Downstairs, and then Downton Abbey and so forth. I saw an interview with him where he says, "Yeah, yeah, this is all nostalgic nonsense in so many ways. The whole thing that every aristocrat is filled with a sense of noblesse oblige, and
Mhm.
and they're all kind to their servants and so on. This is a kind of a repristination of what." An idealization of what we wish aristocracy, you know, could have been truly like instead of the jerks that most of them were. but but you
Yeah.
get my point. There is
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
nostalgia for
Well, right.
hierarchy.
Yeah, no, there's a nostalgia. I mean, so a couple of things is, to affirm hierarchy doesn't mean that, it's right. It's not romantic. It's not idealizing the past and an idea that somehow when authorities were present, everything was perfect. I mean, there's a
Right.
failure, and in some ways, it's even more painful. I mean, that's one of the reasons we decided that it's not worth the pain, you might say, to have authorities. But I think we're starting to realize, I mean, as culture is unraveling, we're starting to realize what goes when we let go of authority. But I find really fascinating how popular things like Downton Abbey and The Crown, that
The
series,
Crown.
Yes.
yeah, and how fascinated the whole world is regarding the British monarchy. I mean, there's a sense in we all recognize that we want this and need this, and it's if it comes in distorted and perverted forms, those are distorted and perverted forms of something beautiful and good that we have a deep longing for. It's also why we love the Lord of the Rings. And I mean, think about what are all of our fairy tales. Think about the books you read to your kids. You know, they're about kings and queens and princesses and princes and knights. And I mean that there's and we read those to our kids because we know that we're kind of communicating something that's fundamentally true about the world. We don't
Yeah,
have
but you're
it
oppressing them with your
definitive.
cisgendered binaries.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, very happily. Um, yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
don't have kids, these tales of the bureaucratic. I
Yeah.
mean, there's that. There's
Sam the
no.
file clerk.
Yeah, unless it turns out that he's a king, you
Secretly.
discover. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you discover that there's something more mysterious. He's kind of come from an ancient family or something. I mean, because that sort of monotonous, leveled out, bureaucratic sense of reality actually doesn't communicate anything to kids. It doesn't form their imaginations. It doesn't populate, establish a horizon and populate it with meaningful things. And we don't realize that we're doing that when we read these stories to kids. I mean, but subconsciously, I think and when it's made explicit, I think we recognize that, yeah, that is what we're doing. We're helping to form them.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the role of authority. And the thing is, because we have it nowhere in the world, we try to get it from our TV shows. We
Yeah.
try to get it in these artificial ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I remember when I was a kid, my dad was into sports, right? And we had it was so interesting. I remember how much he loved Roberto Clemente and
Mhm.
Muhammad Ali. And they
Yeah,
were just like these were household legends,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And as a little kid, I aspired to be like if I wanted to play baseball, I wanted to be like Roberto Clemente, or
yeah,
if I boxed, I wanted to be like Muhammad Ali.
yeah,
And again, that's not like the imposition of power.
yeah.
It's I already have a desire to be like that, and then I see the excellence of these people, and I want to imitate it, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
one of the ways you do is you actually listen religiously to your coach. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
the thing is, we recognize that's how you become an excellent player,
Yep.
and you want a coach who has authority,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
teams in which the coach is just trying to be buddy buddy with
Yeah.
I mean the teams sort of fall apart, and the
Yeah.
kids don't even enjoy playing.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
sense in which it's just not
Yeah.
you're not participating in something bigger.
Yeah.
Uh,
That
yeah,
experience autobiographically, I peaked in junior high in wrestling because I had this great junior high wrestling coach who was like the quintessential coach. Like, come
yeah,
on, guys, you can do
yeah,
it. And then when I got to varsity, we had this coach that was a little bit more like mild mannered and everything was kind of democratic. And I
yeah,
just, I got away with murder. I didn't have to
yeah,
practice hard. And I
yeah.
just, I kind of twittered away my
You lose
talent.
interest.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
lost
yeah. I
interest.
mean,
That's
it's
exactly
just not as interesting anymore.
Hauser, I think you peaked in junior high in almost every way.
This is probably true.
It's been downhill ever since. But this is true. I mean, I remember, I was into sports and stuff too, even though I was a gangly little skinny kid. You grow up in Nebraska, you grow up with a football, in your hand as you're coming out the birth canal. And we all played football, but I was enamored of my teachers
Mhm.
in elementary school and junior high. And the teacher was this authority figure, and you looked up to your teacher, but there's adolescence is characterized then by a certain crisis of authority,
Yeah,
where you begin to understand and realize that your teachers are full of it, and your
yeah,
parents are full of it,
right.
and the only people that you trust are your peers,
Yeah,
and your friends become all important, so and I don't know if that's cultural. That's what I want to know. I mean,
yeah.
would adolescence be a time of rebellion against authority, legitimate authority, hierarchy in every cult, or is this a phenomenon of our society?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to understand that one better too. I get the impression that's one of the things that has defined, when people point to the sexual revolution in 68 and so
Yeah.
forth. One of the reasons that was so weighty with implications, so fraught, was that I think precisely this is what happened. That rather than looking to your family and sort of traditional given institutions as authority figures, your peers became
Yeah.
your culture was just something that you had with your peers over and against your parents,
Yeah.
as
Hmm.
opposed to culture as something that your parents introduce you to. And I think that actually really has profound implications that I'd like to understand better. I don't get the sense that this was always the case, which isn't to say that, you know, um, teenagers didn't have crises in the Middle Ages, but I don't know. It's hard to picture what that would have meant.
I mean,
Well, it seems like St. Francis of Assisi had a
Yeah,
crisis.
there you go. There you
yeah,
go. Yeah,
that was a
yeah,
good crisis. I think that what I used to tell my students, I would just say things in class sometimes that come out of my mouth, and then I would think about them later, and I was
yeah.
like, I think that's actually true.
Yeah.
But
Thank
but I would
goodness.
say
Yeah,
a healthy culture is a
yeah.
culture that shrinks adolescence as much as possible. And
Interesting.
an unhealthy culture is one that stretches it out as much
Mm,
as possible. So if you think
right,
about it, I would
right.
use the anecdote of like seeing 40-year-old moms with their 8-year-old daughters, and they would be dressed alike.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Because the mom's still trying to be an adolescent and the 8-year-old wants to be an adolescent. Right? And
There you
that
go.
can't be a healthy society that stretches
No,
out. Like if you think about it in like the Amish, you're
right.
14, you're having babies, or 15 or
Yeah,
whatever,
that's right.
and
That's
you're
right.
already running a household. And so
Yeah,
there's a shrinking of adolescence there that mitigates against that rebellious period where, right?
yeah.
So that brings up the issue of, and we're kind of maybe, I don't know how long we want to go with this, but this is something related to the question of authority that has always struck me. And I guess it's related to the Christian concept of obedience, but in a broader sense, the question of trust,
Yeah.
uh, evidentiary trust, that an authority engenders within you a sense of trust.
Yeah.
Even when I remember once I was teaching a class at DeSales and I was going on one of my famous riffs where I was referring to Disney World as the Antichrist, which I truly believe it is. And and one of my students came up to me afterwards and said, you know, if that were to come from any other person, I would just reject it as just so much flatulent nonsense. But because it came from you, it made me think twice. And I'm not saying that to build myself up, but to say, yeah, I had a rapport with this student.
Yeah.
This student looked up to me and thought, well, he's intelligent in XYZ, so why in the heck is he saying that Disney World is the Antichrist?
Yeah.
So there, in other words, there was a trust
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. No, I think, and that's for me, a couple of things. One is, first of all, I don't want to give the impression that authority means conformity. I mean,
Right,
precisely
right,
the
right.
contrary. One of the expressions of authority is something like a rebellion, or at least, you want to see the life of the person that you're trying to
Yeah.
bring to maturity.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll take the form of going it alone, and you express authority precisely in letting that happen.
Yeah.
So there's something beautiful about the rebellious youth that I think
Yeah.
is part of the drama of authority. Okay, which is not part of power.
Right.
Um,
They're
uh,
appealing to a higher authority.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's right. That's, if you're an authority, you recognize that this person has an access to order that doesn't only come from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but to the other point, it seems to me that one of the things that's interesting about authority is that it's always concrete. If this is the kind of quasi-sacramental mediation, it really does. It's in the being of persons that authority has its most fundamental expression, rather than the accuracy of statements and so forth. So this relationship of trust is at the foundation of authority, a trust that then becomes the context within which to consider um, propositions, proposals, even commands.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same command could come from somebody like a mediocre coach who has no authority,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes from a coach that is competent. He's excellent, and
Yeah.
he's excellent, and you hear that same command, and you can't wait to follow.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting context. This is the fire in the equation. The context
Yes.
does
So,
sort of introduce a whole new, quality.
Yeah.
and I'm just tossing ideas out here because we're coming to the end, but also the relationship between authority and office.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah.
not all authority is simply the authority of expertise or skill, or you're a mentor to a mentee, blah, 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 parent to a kid, teacher to a student, blah, blah, blah. That there is a certain amount of authority that accrues to office. And
Yeah,
we used to do that with regard to the king, but certainly as Catholics, bishop,
right.
pope, you
Yeah,
know, and I've always been kind of vexed, to be honest, a little bit about the exact relation, because in the Gospels, Rodney alluded to this at the beginning, in the Gospels, the authority of office is directly related to a kind of kenotic dispossession of power.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's something about when you identify authority with so I said the authority is always embodied in a person. It also always transcends a person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
and and there's something about the emphasis of the on the office that's really important for that, because it's not about, in the first place, who it is. It's there's a role that's being played to which the person is subordinate. So it's more paradoxical and complex, but I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
yeah.
That comes out in one of those shows that you were talking about earlier, Dave. I think The Crown, or one of
Oh
those,
yeah,
The
yeah,
Queen maybe, or whatever, where the lady doesn't think she's ready to be queen yet.
yeah, yeah,
And somebody gives her a really bracing speech saying, "Look, the office is there.
yeah,
You have to just enter into the office. Like, forget
yeah.
about yourself, your inadequacies, you know."
Yeah, no, which is really interesting
Yeah.
because in the kind of modern bourgeois liberal framework, we can't think of authority except in terms of like power hungry people. But
Yeah.
it's so and so this and this becomes a kind of privileged exercise of self-interest. This is what they debated actually in Plato's Republic,
Yeah.
that what it means to be an authority is to be a guy with, a self-interested guy like all the rest of us, but now you are in a position to fulfill these desires that you have. But I
Yeah.
mean, the crown is such a powerful. The later seasons were not quite as compelling. The early ones, the first and second, were, I have to say, some of the most
Yeah.
interesting things I ever saw
Yeah.
on television. But that's precisely it. There was something radically kenotic
Yeah.
in her entering into this office. She had to
Right.
give up all of her self-interest in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Exactly.
mean, it's one of the most purely sort of kenotic things that I've seen. There's a kind of a martyrdom,
Yeah.
and the early seasons showed such a profound sense of that. And there was such a dignity to her.
Yeah.
Things got complicated
Yeah.
as time went
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. As modernity happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I mean, I was standing in St. Peter's Square
Hmm.
when Pope Leo was elected. I was blessed and
Wow.
fortunate enough
Yeah.
to be in Rome when all that went down. And the thing that struck me immediately as Leo walked out onto the loggia was that he was decked out
Yeah.
in full papal regalia.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No comment on Pope Francis walking out in a simple white cassock or whatever. The immediate symbolism of
Yeah.
Leo stepping out in full papal regalia was the office is bigger than me, than
Yeah.
I, than
Yeah.
I,
That's right. That's right.
and that I'm going to live in the apostolic palace. I'm going to vacation at Castel Gandolfo. I
Right.
may not want to be at Castel
That's
Gandolfo. I
right.
may not want to live in the drafty, cavernous apostolic palace,
Yeah.
with its
But it's
bad
not about
radiation.
me.
It's not about me. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents on Pope Leo, who I like, by the way.
Yeah.
But anyway, are there any last thoughts that you gentlemen might want to toss out here in our discussion of authority before we wrap this up?
No, but maybe just one last observation.
Sure,
Just,
absolutely.
one experience that I hear, and I was reading, I don't know if you know Matthew Del Santo. He teaches out in at St. Patrick's with Adrian Walker. Very interesting.
Oh, yeah, I do know
He's
him.
got an
Yeah.
article coming out in the Communio issue on authority, but he has a book about the Russian sense of the anointed king. Really, it's really interesting, the czar. But he recounts, and this is something you see, you read stories about, when a genuine authority like a pope or a king, people will just break down in tears. Like you'll be so moved by the presence
Mhm.
of the authority. I just find that a fascinating.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, perfect example. Have either one of you seen today the video of Pope Leo in Lebanon?
No.
Oh my goodness. He was like a rock star. It
Yeah.
was incredible. The nuns weeping and you know how devoted Lebanese
Yeah.
Catholics are to the Catholic Church and to the
Yeah.
papacy, the Maronite I mean, it wasn't fake. It wasn't like
Right.
theatrical. It was just this outpouring of unbelievable emotion that the Vicar of Christ was here with us.
That's
Wow.
right. Yeah, and you can, and you know that there is a drama there, that this is dangerous because it's easy to make that about you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
the effect that you have on people. But I mean that's the loss of authority the moment that happens.
There were a couple of scenes where Pope Leo was, up on a dais about to give a talk, and the crowds were cheering. You could see that tears were welling up in his
Yeah,
eyes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and which I think is an indication of what you were saying just now, David,
Right.
that he was aware this isn't about me.
Yeah, yeah,
This isn't about me, and probably aware of what shoes he had stepped
yeah.
into.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and we've all had this experience in different ways. You feel humbled by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's often what you say. This is humbling. I mean,
Yeah.
you think humbling? The world is sort of weeping in your presence, and that's humbling. Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is humbling because
Because
it's
Terrifying.
not, you
yeah,
realize it's
because
not about me.
yeah, you realize that there's something coming to presence in and through me that eclipses me
Wait.
infinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm moved by it too. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's amazing. That's the aesthetic dimension of
Yes.
authority,
Yes. Yeah.
properly
Yeah.
understood.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Rodney, any last words?
No, I think that's a good way of summing it up.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
ending on the beautiful. We started with the beautiful, we end
yeah.
with the beautiful. I like it.
Yes. Well, Dave, I can't thank you enough. This has been a real fun conversation. Those who don't know, who are, don't know me, don't know Dave or Rodney, know that we're very old friends. I remember you before you had a PhD.
That's
You
right.
were,
Yeah.
Really?
I
I
think I
met you
met
for the
both of
first time
you.
in 1994. I met you for the first time, and
Wow. Yeah.
you and Adrian Walker were a couple of young Turks just making your way up the ladder. So it was great.
That's right. At a conference that you threw,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah, yeah.
on,
That
on
Peter Casarella referred to as Larry's Balthazar Biodome. This was all self-contained in the Allentown Hilton, and we never went anywhere else. It was right
yeah.
there. So yeah, that's where I first met you and your father and the whole Comunio crowd, and the rest isn't that we hired Howsare in '99 or whatever it was. And well, actually, you were at that Balthazar conference,
Yeah, he
Rodney.
was right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
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 that's where we first met, and
Yep. Before I got hired. Yeah.
That's
before you
hard to
got it.
believe. Wow.
Yeah. So
Back
yeah,
in the
we're
day.
now we're all old and decrepit. So there
Yep,
we go.
we
Anyway,
are.
thanks.
But we have
Thanks,
more
guys.
authority. We have more authority.
I, I, that's not true. If you knew I'm sorry, I'm choking on my Negroni now. That's funny. Those things in St. Paul, Ephesians about obedience and all that. There's a strange Christological inversion in my household. So.
Yeah.
But
All
which
right.
I happily embrace, so that's fine. But anyway, thank you guys. This has been a fun
Thanks, Larry.
conversation.
Yeah.
And when your book comes out, Dave, I'll promote it, and hopefully people will buy it. And thanks everybody for listening. And that's it for today. Thank you.
Good night.
Awesome.